Hello, dear students. Our topic for presentation today is Hirschsprung's disease, or here on I will call it as HD, Hirschsprung's disease. Now we will discuss the topic under the following headings. We will go about a brief introduction, then we will discuss about the history, different types of Hirschsprung's disease, then we will go into the pathological aspects of the disease, the clinical presentation, then we will go into the diagnosis, how we diagnose is both histologically and radiologically, the initial management, the different types of definitive procedures, and a bit detail about the surgeries because some are necessary when we attend our regular postings, and certain variants of Hirschsprung's disease will run through it. The postoperative course and the long-term prognosis will run through that topics. Now, what is Hirschsprung's disease or congenital megacolon? It is the absence of ganglion cells in the meandric and submucosal plexus of the intestine. So we can see the absent ganglion part. So this part which is contracted is the part where there is absent ganglionic cells, and this dilated colon is the normal colon. So this contracted part where there is no progress of peristalsis is the absent ganglion cell part, or which is affected with Hirschsprung's disease, and this dilated looking segment is just dilated because of the obstruction. So it is also called congenital megacolon. Coming to the history part of it, this disease is discussed in Susruta Samhita in the 17th century. Then Harald Hirschsprung described two cases of this condition in 1887. The absent ganglion cells, the Hirschsprung's disease is due to absent ganglion cells, was discussed by Teitel in 1901 and Ehrenpreis in 1946. Svensson described the procedure for Hirschsprung's disease in 1949, and coming to the incidence of the disease, it is present in 1 in 5,000 live births. So there are different types of Hirschsprung's disease. One is Hirschsprung's disease HD involving the rectosigmoid junction or below the rectosigmoid junction, which occurs in more than 80% of the cases, and a few of them are ultra short Hirschsprung's disease, and that will come to it. And next is the proximal colonic involvement or the long segment HD in 10% and total colonic aganglionosis in 10%. So where this is the rectosigmoid involving the short segment HD involving the rectosigmoid junction, only this much part is affected, rest is dilated. In ultra short segment Hirschsprung's disease, only the near the internal sphincter is only affected. In short segment until the rectosigmoid part that is affected. In proximal colonic involvement, we can see that the disease HD affects this much parts of the bowel. There are no ganglion cells in this much part of the bowel. This is the long segment HD. Any HD which goes beyond the rectosigmoid junction is the long segment HD. And next is the total colonic aganglionosis. Here the complete colon is aganglionic. We can see the dilated ileum. The colon is completely aganglionic, so it is constricted. We can see the dilated ileum. It is seen in 10% of the cases. Now, what is the etiology and genetic basis of the disease? This is due to we know that it is due to the absence of migration of the ganglion cells, which is derived from the neural cluster cells. Just to brush our embryology, we have the neural plate, the notochord, and we have the delaminating neural crest cells here and the neural crest cells migrating. So normally they become ganglion cells in the large intestine by migrating up to here in the rectum. But in case of Hirschsprung's disease, we can see when it only migrates up to the rectosigmoid junction, it becomes a short segment HD, and if it only migrates up to here, it becomes a long segment HD, not until the rectosigmoid junction. So this migration of ganglion cells from the cranial to caudal direction is affected in HD. Now, which ganglion cells? We know that the ganglions in the sympathetic chain are in of the sympathetic system are in the sympathetic chain. No ganglion cells are near the organ. So the parasympathetic ganglia is affected. The craniosacral outflow of the parasympathetic ganglia is affected, and the ganglions in the colon are affected. Let us see. So our initial thought process when we learn when we study early, our thought process is that this is the sympathetic system with the sympathetic ganglia here and nerve fibers into the visceral organs, and the parasympathetic system, the craniosacral outflow, the parasympathetic system comes here, it goes with it, there is ganglion cells, and from there nerve fiber supply to the visceral organs. But exactly the system does not work like this exactly. It works as there is a parasympathetic system and there is a sympathetic system, but there is a communication between the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system in and around the ganglia and the blood vessels. So there is a communication between the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system happening in the intramuscular ganglia. But what happens in Hirschsprung's disease? There is no parasympathetic system. So it is not only that the sympathetic system is not working parasympathetic system is not working properly because of the ganglion cells. The work of the sympathetic system is also affected. The result is that when the peristalsis comes, when there is no ganglion cells, the peristalsis doesn't go forward. So there is constriction and spasm of the bowel here, resulting in a functional obstruction, resulting in HD. So just to see the anatomy of the ganglion cell, here we have the intramuscular plexus between the circular and longitudinal layers, and here we have the submucous plexus. So the myenteric plexus and the submucous plexus, the myenteric Auerbach's plexus and the submucosal Meissner's plexus. Now, this is the nerve distribution normally seen. We can see in the normal bowel the amount of connections between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic system, and coming to the HD bowel, the connections are very less. With this much less connections, there ought to be an obstruction or a functional problem. Now, 90% of the HD are not syndromic, but around 10% of HD is associated with this different list of syndromes. We have to understand some of the syndromes which is associated with HD, even if we are not able to completely remember the list. For example, Down syndrome or trisomy 21 is associated with HD. Then there is neurocristopathy, then there is piebaldism, where there is a Waardenburg-Shaw syndrome, where there is white forelock of hair is also associated with HD. Then there are other neurocristopathy syndromes associated with pigmentation. Then there is a congenital central hypoventilation syndrome or the Ontine's curse. You can see the patient is on tracheostomy and on a ventilator. When he sleeps, he dies because there is central hypoventilation. Now coming to the clinical presentation and diagnosis. First, let us discuss the clinical presentation. At what all age groups the HD can be seen. HD antenatal presentation, there can be some dilated loops, but it is not antenatal HD, and HD cannot be detected properly in antenatal scans. The sensitivity and specificity for HD in antenatal scans is very, very low. Then coming to the one of the most common presentation is delayed passage of meconium. The meconium will generally pass within 24 hours. If it is delayed for more than 48 hours, we have to consider the possibility of HD or any other functional problems with the anatomical obstruction in the bowel. Now, Patient can present with bilious vomiting due to the functional obstruction of HD. Any bilious vomiting in a newborn period is surgical unless otherwise proved. Sometimes HD can also present with abdominal distension. If it is only abdominal distension, it is fine. But if there is if there is more of distension, there can be even perforation. So the distension in HD is pathological for HD, is a clinical feature. Now, sometimes in a bit of older age group, the patient can present with chronic constipation and delayed difficulty in stooling. Now, another presentation in a bit more older age group, the child can present with abdominal distension and failure to thrive. In a newborn period, the child can also present with Hirschsprung associated enterocolitis and sepsis. In this condition, what happens is that there is bacterial overgrowth and increased production of mucin, and there can be explosive diarrhea, and the child can present in sepsis. Now, what are the differential diagnoses of this condition? Are all abdominal distension, are all bilious vomiting HD? So we have to consider the differential diagnosis when we see no anatomical abnormality, but we see a functional obstruction of the bowel. So you have to think about chronic constipation, hypothyroidism, irritable bowel syndrome, hypothyroidism. You look at the knee centers and see whether there is hypothyroidism in case of an infantogram in an X-ray, irritable bowel syndrome. Other things are anorectal malformations, intestinal atrachis or stenosis, and intestinal malrotation. Again, another set of differential diagnosis ranging from meconium blockage to cystic fibrosis is also there. So, to understand which one is HD and what not is HD, we have to rule out other cases by doing TSH, by doing a proper clinical examination. Now we have all these differential diagnoses. We have to find which one is real HD and which requires a surgical management and which one requires a medical management. Of course, we have to take an infantogram, look for the knee centers, look for the blood levels of TSH. But to diagnose HD, our first tool is to take an erect abdominal X-ray. This is the normal pattern of abdominal X-ray in a newborn. We can see a equal distribution of the gas, bowel gas, and also now see the shape of the gas in the bowel. See, this is the shape of the gas in the bowel, a polygonal shape. Okay, that is important. You have to see that shape of the gas in the bowel, this polygonal shape. But when the bowel is getting to start dilated, this polygonal shape becomes more and more circular shapes. And in advanced stages, it can be really dilated. We can see the dilated colon and ileal loops really dilated, and there will be an absence of rectal gas in case of HD. So dilated loops and absence of rectal gas in HD. Now, once the plain X-ray is over, we have to inject contrast. The contrast we use is a barium. First, we have to inject dilute barium, a bit dilute barium, in and around the consistency of milk through the anal canal in a very slow fashion, with ensuring that the tip is maintained at the anal opening. And this barium contrast goes like this. The patient is kept in the lateral position. We can see the spine here. The patient is kept in the lateral position. We can see in this film, if this is a picture of HD, the rectum is not dilated and the sigmoid colon is dilated. So in normal case, the rectum will be dilated. The rectum is the storage, the reservoir. It will be dilated, and the sigmoid colon will not be as much dilated as the rectum. So in case of an HD, this ratio is reversed. So this ratio, normally we can see the rectum is bigger, and the sigmoid colon is not that big. In case of an HD, this ratio, the rectosigmoid ratio is reversed. The rectum is becoming smaller and the sigmoid colon is large. So the reversal of the rectosigmoid ratio happens in HD. So a contrast X-ray with barium in the lateral position first will demonstrate this reversal of the rectosigmoid ratio. Now we have to, once we make sure that we have injected the barium, now we can take an AP view after injecting some more barium. This can, in certain cases, this can really delineate the thinned out segment, really delineate the constricted segment and the dilated normal colon, the constricted aganglionic colon and the dilated normal colon. Another thing to notice here is the transition zone. This is the aganglionic bowel and this is the dilated normal bowel. In between we can see this triangular shaped thing, which is the transition zone from the aganglionic segment to the ganglionic segment. So we have to identify where the transition zone is. Depending upon where the transition zone is, we can term it as a short segment HD, where the transition zone is in the rectosigmoid, and ultra short segment HD, where there is no clear-cut transition zone will be visible in the barium. It will be very lower down near the sphincter. And in case of a long segment HD, the rectosigmoid transition zone will be above the rectosigmoid. And in case of in total colon ganglionosis, we will not see any dilated colon. We'll come to it. Now, in certain cases, we will not be able to clearly delineate the transition zone, but there will be some amount of distension and some amount of dilatation of the bowel. So in order to see whether the function of the bowel is normal, whether the bowel is excreting this contrast, we take a film, repeat the X-ray after 24 hours. That is our 24-hour retention film. If what do we normally expect in a 24-hour retention film? We expect that the barium is passed and we expect a near clear film after 24 hours. But if there is a retention of barium like this in X-ray, seeing the dilated loops and an equal distribution of barium or a mixed distribution of barium like this, we can make sure that it is an HD. It is a strong possibility of HD if there is a 24-hour retention film shows a dilatation like this. So in most of the cases, a contrast X-ray and the clinical findings will help us to diagnose whether it is an HD or not. But still there can be some confusion. In those cases, earlier even in our institution also, anorectal manometry was done, but it is not that specific and sensitive in newborn. So over the time period, anorectal manometry, we started depending less upon anorectal manometry and gone for the contrast X-rays. So how does this anorectal manometry works? So we have a rectal balloon here. Suppose if the balloon in the rectum is enlarged, that is the rectum is dilated, what we expect is that the sphincter should relax. So in a graph like that, if this is the graph of the sphincter. So this is a normal sphincter tone happening. Once there is a rectal dilatation, what should happen is the sphincter tone should come down. The external sphincter will contract a bit and the internal sphincter should relax after that. So there should be relaxation of the internal sphincter when there is a balloon dilatation of the rectum. This is the normal pattern we are expecting in a normal bowel. But in case of an HD, what happens is, when we give a rectal distension, what happens is, instead of this internal sphincter relaxing, the tone of the internal sphincter goes up. So this is a classical feature of HD which can be demonstrated in anorectal manometry. Next is suction rectal biopsy. What we can do is, we can take the submucosal plexus, which will give us an idea whether how the ganglion cells are there. So for that, a suction rectal biopsy is done. We can see this is the method by which we do that. There is a side channel for suction and some amount of submucosa is sucked into it and a biopsy is taken. In suction rectal biopsy, when we can see the hypertrophied nerve trunks and there is absence of ganglion cells in the Meissner's plexus, we can say that it can be an HD. This is the normal appearing ganglion cells and there is paucity of ganglion cells here. So that is what we are seeing in suction rectal biopsy. But diagnosing HD is not always very easy with the suction biopsy. So sometimes a full thickness biopsy may be required. A patient is positioned like this, sutures can be taken like this, and a circular biopsy with a full thickness is taken and the ensuing defect is closed. So with the normal staining techniques, full thickness biopsy can help the pathologist. But sometimes even with that, we may not be able to make a definitive diagnosis. In those situations, special stains come to our help. One is cholinesterase staining. This brown thing is the cholinesterase staining. When there is more cholinesterase staining, it is abnormal. You can see the red boundary. It is abnormal. It is suggestive of HD. Another one stain is calretinine staining. Again, in calretinine staining, when there is no staining of calretinine stains the ganglion cell. When there is no staining of ganglion cells, it is abnormal. Again, no staining with calretinine. This brown is not here. So no staining with calretinine is abnormal, whereas a positive stain with acetylcholinesterase is abnormal. So that is regarding the special stains. But many a times what happens is, the surgeon may not completely believe the pathologist when we do a frozen section or a suction biopsy if the pathologist is not very experienced. We have to directly see what is happening for the bowel. If the bowel is functioning properly, then the chance is that the bowel is ganglionic. If the bowel is not functioning properly and the child is again constipated even after a colostomy, that means the part which comes out as colostomy is not ganglionic. I'll discuss it again. But before coming to colostomy, we can see what is the preoperative preparations for colostomy. When we get the child like this due to abdominal distension, a nasogastric drainage is good, IV fluids has to be given, fluid resuscitation, antibiotics should be given, rectal decompression can be done. If we put a rectal thermometer, we can decompress the bowel if the thermometer goes beyond the level of absent ganglion cell segment. So that is also a clinical finding which we can view in the HD. When we put the rectal thermometer into the rectum, we can see a gush of the fecal matter coming. So that is a clinical finding which is suggestive of HD when we examine the anorectum. Now evaluate for other cardiac disorders whether it is a syndromic HD or not. Then there can be primary pull through. We can bring the bowel which is normally ganglion, where there is normal ganglion, towards the anal canal. So this suppose the transition zone is here. It is a long segment. We can bring this bowel to the anal canal. So that is the one method that is called primary pull through, which we are not practicing, so I am not going to discuss it further. What we are doing is we'll do a colostomy first, make sure that the bowel is working well, and then we'll go for a pull through procedure. We'll come to it. Now coming to the surgical management. Surgical management, the aim of what are the goals of our surgical management? One is to remove the aganglionic bowel, to reconstruct the intestinal tract, to bring the normally innervated bowel to the anus, and to preserve the normal sphincter function. We do this in two stages. One, we remove the aganglionic segment and decompress the bowel in our colostomy. Make sure that that bowel is functioning properly, there is no obstruction, and it is ganglionic after definitive pathological staining. After that part is over, by around 6 months, the period when we do a definitive pull through varies. By around 6 months or so, we do a pull through, bringing the normally ganglionic bowel towards the anal canal. We remove this part and bring the normal ganglionic bowel towards the anal canal. So our first stage is colostomy. What type of colostomy we will do? We will do a leveling colostomy. What is a leveling colostomy? So when we open the abdomen, this is the picture of the bowel we see. The incision is on the left side. What we can see is, we can see a dilated bowel and we can see a constricted bowel, and in between we can see this transition zone, and we take a biopsy from this constricted area, which is the aganglionic area. We take a full thickness biopsy and send to the pathologist and make sure that make sure the diagnosis. We will get it after 2 weeks. Now after that, above the transition zone, we take some part of this transition zone bowel and give that also for the biopsy, and clearly above the transition zone, we do a colostomy where we think it is the normal bowel. The dilated bowel is normal, the constricted bowel is abnormal. So that is the leveling colostomy. We do a colostomy above the level of transition zone. Now coming to the definitive surgeries of Hirschsprung's disease. They are the Duhamel, Swenson, and so there are other surgeries, we are not going to discuss it. We are more discussing about the Duhamel, Swenson's procedure and Sauvage procedure. In all these procedures, the normal ganglionic bowel is brought towards the anus. We will discuss. In Duhamel procedure, what happens is the patient is after colostomy, patient comes after routine follow-up, and after that the definitive procedure, what we do is, so this is the side view, we can see the rectum here, the hand inside the anal canal, and we develop a space posterior to the rectum, and we bring this, we mobilize we cut off any additional bowel here with a stapler, and we bring our we put an incision here, like this is the incision near the anal canal, and we put in our artery here. Then we mobilize our colostomy, and we are sure that this colostomy is working by now, and there is no evidence of obstruction, and we are sure that we will also send a biopsy of the tip of the colostomy, the end part of the colostomy, and we will pull through this colostomy posterior to this and bring it out through the incision we have put in the anal canal. This incision we have put in the anal canal, we will bring through the bowel. So we have brought out the bowel, we have opened the bowel, and we anastomose this bowel to this bowel. So it appears like this. This anastomosis is happening. This anastomosis is completed. Don't worry, you'll understand in the next picture. We can see this anastomosis between this bowel and this bowel is completed. So we have a common wall here. We can see a common wall between the native bowel and the pull through bowel, which is pulled through posteriorly. So this common wall has to be divided. This common wall is divided with a stapler. Sometimes the division may not be complete, and some amount of a ganglionic bowel will be staying free without continuation to the lumen. That is called a spur. And sometimes, most of the times, we will be able to put the stapler without lot of spur. Even if there is a spur, we can put another stapler from above, or we can do a anastomosis, and we can make sure that there is no spur for HD. So no, so we have a ganglionic bowel which can act as some amount of reservoir here, and we have a ganglionic bowel which makes sure, and the ganglionic bowel sensation will be normal. So this part will act for the sensation, and this part will act for the propulsion of feces. So there is no more obstruction, and the normal bowel is at the anal canal, and there is no problem for the progression of the peristalsis. That is HD, Hirschsprung's disease, which is the most commonly done procedure in our institution. But since HD is a big topic, we should also able to understand what the other procedures are available for this. What next is Sauvage procedure. So what he did was is simple. This is our bowel. So he stripped off the mucosa just like that. He kept the muscular cuff there. He only removed the mucosa. So the mucosa will be now laying outside like this. You can see the mucosa is stripped and the mucosa is laying outside like this. And the pull through bowel he is bringing through this muscular cuff. So instead of creating a space posteriorly, he is bringing the pull through bowel through the muscular cuff of the aganglionic bowel segment. The mucosa is stripped and it is lying here. So once that pull through bowel is out, anastomosis is made with the mucosa, and this final anal opening is made. So in Sauvage's procedure, the pull through bowel lies in this black muscular cuff of the aganglionic bowel. Again, the normal bowel is here. No problem for the peristalsis to come until anal canal, and there is no obstruction. Only problem is there is a small amount of muscular cuff lying there. Now we have already discussed that Swenson told about the initial procedure, but it is technically challenging procedure and there is more chance for nerve injury. So Swenson's more of Sauvage's procedure, which is and Duhamel's procedure, and in our institution Duhamel's procedure is most commonly done. What happens in Swenson's procedure? This is an intra-abdominal view. We are seeing from the abdomen, we can see the aganglionic bowel. What happens is in Swenson's procedure is he removed the aganglionic bowel completely from here. Not only the mucosa, also the muscle, the complete muscle and serosa. The complete bowel is removed, and the normal bowel is pulled through, brought from here to here. This complete bowel is removed. It is technically a bit more challenging than the other two procedures, and there are more complications for Swenson's procedure if not properly done. Now the mobilization of the colostomy and the mobilization of the bowel can be done. Mobilization of the bowel can be done laparoscopically, and we can do a laparoscopic pull through. Another one is a transanal approach, where we can pull the bowel from inside. We can pull the bowel from the inside and then do the same thing, but this is just for academical purposes. There is a transanal approach and there is a laparoscopic approach for the above said procedures. So where a procedure is more laparoscopic friendly. So these are the definitive Duhamel, Swenson and Sauvage's surgeries. Now coming to long segment Hirschsprung's disease. In long segment Hirschsprung's disease, what happens is that there is no ganglion cells in the bowel, in the colon. The ileum is dilated and there is a classical question mark sign. The bowel will not be fully developed, mesentery will not be fully developed. There is a classical question mark sign. So long segment HD, we have to distinguish between ileal atresia. If the contrast, the question mark sign is one feature. Next is if the contrast is entering the ileum into a dilated segment, it is a HD because there is an obstruction. The contrast will enter into a dilated ileum. If the ileum is also constricted, it is more likely to be ileal atresia. So based on the contrast findings, based on the barium findings, we can differentiate between a long segment HD and an ileal atresia. Now there are procedures for long segment HD like Martin's procedure and Kimura's procedure, which we are not going to discuss. You can read about it. And coming to the post-operative care, we have to, feedings can be started after 24 to 48 hours after colostomy. You can do dilatations of the anal canal after 2 weeks, and we have to dilate and we should give protection for the. Now coming to the long-term outcomes of the HD or postoperatively and long-term outcomes. Postoperatively there can be obstructive symptoms, and in long term there can be fecal soiling if the pull-through bowel is not well ganglionated, or if there is a chronic constipation, there can be enterocolitis. So that is regarding HD. It's so in brief we have discussed about the HD, its history of Hirschsprung's disease. Then we have discussed the different types of HD, the rectosigmoid involving the rectosigmoid short segment, the complete colon, total colonic ganglionosis. If the HD is beyond the rectosigmoid, it is called a long segment HD, and there is another entity known as ultra short segment HD, where there is a problem with the internal sphincter. Then we have discussed about the pathology, the absence of the ganglion cells, the absent migration of the ganglion cell, or the less migration of the ganglion cells until the distal, and the sympathetic ganglia and the parasympathetic ganglia, and the lack of the connections. Then we have also discussed about the clinical presentation, the different types of clinical presentation, the different age group of clinical presentation, bilious vomiting, delayed passage of meconium. We have also discussed about how to diagnose HD based upon X-rays, how to rule out the differential diagnosis, the contrast X-rays, the barium anemia, and the 24-hour retention film. And we have also discussed about the anorectal manometry, which we are not using now, and how to do a full thickness and a partial thickness biopsy. And we have discussed about our initial management of colostomy, a leveling colostomy, how we take the biopsy in case of a leveling colostomy. And then we have discussed about the different types of definitive procedures like Duhamel, Swenson, and Sauvage procedure. And we have discussed in detail the procedure. We have also discussed about the long segment HD, and we have also discussed the long-term problems associated with HD. So that is all regarding Hirschsprung's disease. Thank you. Have a nice day.